Hi, I'm Rachel here with my cat Leia, and in light of the fact that my reading is going slower than I'd hope, I thought now would be a great time to do a book haul. July is my birthday month, so I use that as an excuse to get myself a lot of books. In a few videos a couple of months ago, I was waving around a coupon for my library bookstore, and the week before my birthday I went to said bookstore and I used that coupon, and I have a few books to show from that excursion. This first one was actually the smallest and the most expensive at $4. It's Ragtime by E.L. Doctorow. I added this to my TBR around the time that Doctorow died. I was curious to read about his take on the Jewish American experience, and this one stood out to me as something somewhat important. He wrote it in '75, and it's about the American Jewish world in between, I think, the beginning of the 20th century and World War I. There's sort of a fantastical bit to this where real characters, I think, meet up with his fictional family. So there's like Houdini and Emma Goldman and a bunch of fictional people. So it's been on my TBR a while, and now I'm really looking forward to getting to it. This next book wasn't on my TBR or my radar at all. It's Holding My Breath by Sidora Ludwig. I was drawn to it because of this cover, you know, the Ferris wheel and this airplane. This is from the fact that it was a library book, I think, so they had to get rid of some stuff, I think. And it is a Jewish book about a family and focusing on female characters from that family in Manitoba, Canada. So a very different setting for me. And I was really thrilled to find it. I just read the cover flap because of the cover. And lo and behold, it's something that I'm naturally very drawn to. I get a lot of book recommendations from the website Jewish Book Council. But I think this one was published in 2007. It was before, I believe, Jewish Book Council was up, or before the time period that I was looking at and adding books to my TBR. So really thrilled to have found it, and just seems just like my cup of tea. This next one is very recent and is pretty popular on BookTube, or at least was among some circles a few months ago. It's All Grown Up by Jamie Attenberg. It's the story of a 30 or 40-something woman in New York and trying to think of what it means to be a woman who is single in today's world, that sort of thing. It's gotten a lot of praise, I think, for being well written and a step above the rest of her works. I've read one of her works before, The Middlesteins, and I liked it pretty well. And also St. Maisie, a historical work she wrote a couple of years ago, and that was pretty famous too. But at least some people that I really admire on Book Riot, like Rebecca Shinsky, said that this one really takes the cake. So I put it on my list anyway of Jewish books published in 2017 that I'd like to read, and I was thrilled to find it for so cheap and so quickly. It's also a Book of the Month book. I've never had one of those before. I don't subscribe to Book of the Month myself, so I'm kind of thrilled to have it. I don't assume there's anything particularly special about this copy anymore, but still pretty cool to have that logo. Next, we have a short story collection from Israel. It's called Apples from the Desert by Savion Lichtbrecht. That's kind of hard to say. I heard about this because several years ago, or a couple of years ago, there was a Israeli movie at the Jewish Film Festival in DC that was based on one of these short stories. It was about an Orthodox girl in Jerusalem who was tired of living under her father's thumb, and she ran away to a kibbutz. And then I read up on it later because I liked the story so much, and I realized it was by this author and that she had this collection, so I put it on my TBR, and lo and behold, I found it. I believe Lichtbrecht is somewhat well-known author, I suppose, in Israel. She was born in 1948 in Germany and immigrated there in her childhood. So in a way, I think she's a classic sort of writer. Or maybe I'm just going off of the fact that Grace Paley wrote a foreword, so I figure this woman has to be a significant figure in Israeli letters. So I'll be looking forward to reading what Paley has to say about her too. This next book was published in 2009. It's called A Fortunate Age by Joanna Smith Rakoff. It was also something that I found on the Jewish Book Council, and I believe it's because the characters are nominally Jewish. It's about these young women who graduate from Oberlin College in the late 90s and then move to New York City, and about their experiences as young adults in that time period, which is a very significant political time period, of course, because it's also around the time of 9/11. And I always enjoy novels about young women finding their ways in the world. And I always hope it has a little more nuance than I thought the show Girls did. So it's a kind of a big book. Let's see, it's well, it's 399 pages, so it's bigger than most books. So hopefully there's a lot of stuff in here that is interesting in the character arc way. Moving away from Jewish fiction for the moment, we have The Shore by Sarah Taylor. This is a book, when I saw it, I think I remembered Liberty talking about it on one of the Book Riot podcasts, and I looked it up on my phone about when this was published and when Book Riot had articles about it, and I believe it was 2015. So I'm remembering stuff from 2015 when meanwhile I can barely remember what I did at work yesterday. But this is the type of story that really appeals to me. There's interconnecting narratives, it's very family-based. It also takes place on the Chesapeake Bay, which is sort of more or less in my backyard. And like Cloud Atlas by David Mitchell, another book I really enjoyed, it's a story that goes backwards and forwards in time, and it starts like in the 1800s, and then it moves into the future. I believe the final story is taking place in 2143. That sort of thing really excites me. I don't know what it is about futuristic stories, but I just love the idea of authors playing with the idea of where they think that we're moving in the future, especially when they connect it to the past. So, yep, I'm also looking forward to reading this one. Speaking of moving chronologically, now I move from the week before my birthday to my actual birthday. I came into the Baltimore County environs that day because that's where my parents are, and I was doing a brunch with my family, but also the first thing I did when I got in the area was I saw a movie with my college roommate. And it was in this outdoor mall, so after that we did some walking around and got some ice cream and ended up in Barnes & Noble. And we split ways after a while looking at some books, and I ended up in the science fiction and fantasy section, and I came across The Space Between the Stars by Anne Corlett. And I'd been thinking about it for a while because of the premise. It's a very Stations 11 by Emily St. John Mandel premise. It's about the human race being wiped out mostly by a disease, and about the survivors looking for some sort of connection with one another. So very Stations 11. Stations 11 was one of my favorite books a couple of years ago, and I tend to have a tick in my mind that whenever I hear a book that's compared to it, I really want to pick it up. Beyond that, I first heard about this book on Katie's channel, Books and Things, because she knows the author and they went to writing classes together for their MFA, and she was raving about the book, and she also loves Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. So I immediately put this onto my TBR, and I was looking at it in the bookstore and debating, you know, do I need to buy it right now, or maybe I could wait and ultimately get it at the library or get it another time. I don't really need to buy anything for myself right now. And I was doing a good job of talking myself out of it, I swear. But then my roommate came up to me and her arms were laden with books. And she was like, I'm trying to see if I should only buy one or two of these, or if I shouldn't buy any of these. I really want them. So I snatched up this book and I said, let's do this. And my final birthday book is a book that I actually got from other people and not from myself. Ooh, what do you know? I can't really blame them, considering that I buy so many for myself anyway. This is from my parents, and they picked it off of my list, and I put this on again after seeing it on the Jewish Book Council website. This is Homa Caramba, and it is an anthology of Latin American Jewish short stories. I just love this cover, you know, with the festive skull. And of course that title's a lovely pun. And we have short stories from, well, it's all laid out by country. Argentina, Colombia, Chile, Peru, Uruguay, Venezuela, Cuba, Guatemala, and Brazil. And at least a couple of stories from each, usually translated from Spanish, sometimes translated from Yiddish. Of course, the Brazilian has some Portuguese. I don't actually see any Ladino. That's rather interesting. But I'm very excited about this. I mean, from a cultural standpoint as well as a literary one, to get a sense of the Jewish communities in this country. So, yep, yeah, and my mother also wants to read this, which I think is part of the reason why she got it for me. So, yeah, I'm really happy to have this added to my collection. That about covers it for me. I don't know if you can see, but Leia has gotten under the covers a little bit herself. So, I hope that all of you are having a great July and great reading months, no matter if it's your birthday or not. Hope you're acquiring things that you love. I definitely need to start cracking on some of these things and reading them, and not just using them as a book tripod for this camera. Oh, so much to read, so much to read. Which I suppose is a good enough cue as any to get off the camera now. So thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.